Memphis, 1969. The sidewalk radiates heat in South Memphis as 9-year-old Jenny Campbell sits on a folding chair outside a rundown corner grocery. In front of her, a handmade cardboard sign scrawled in uneven letters, "My drawings, 50 cents." Her pictures, done in colored pencil, are warped at the corners from humidity and wear. Most people pass without a glance. A few pause, unsure whether to pity her or ignore her. But Jenny's gaze doesn't waver. Behind her wide, pale eyes is something fierce. Not desperation, but resolve. What they don't know is this. She's not selling art to buy candy. She's raising money to keep going. Because the doctors stopped asking for payment. Because her mother stopped asking for help. And because the man who will change everything is about to pull up in a long black Cadillac and ask her a question no one else dared to. The afternoon sun beat down hard on McLemore Avenue, turning the dust in the air into brittle gold motes that danced above the worn asphalt. Beneath that light, 9-year-old Jenny Campbell sat on a chipped folding chair outside Payne's grocery, her small frame hunched over a cardboard sign reading, "My drawings, 50 cents." Beside her, a battered wooden crate held a handful of colored pencil sketches, edges curled from last night's humidity. Each time a car passed, its tires sent up tiny storms of grit that settled on Jenny's bare ankles and the scuffed leather of her mother's old Oxford shoes. She lifted her chin, deliberately, trying to keep her shoulders from trembling. 2 years had passed since her father, a lanky sergeant in the army, never returned from Vietnam. Their single-story bungalow by the railway tracks felt emptier every day, its wooden siding bleached by sun and neglect. Jenny's mother, Ruth, worked 14-hour shifts at the laundry down on Beale Street, her strong arms wringing out sheets until her knuckles cracked. The medical bills, rife with ominous terms like lymphoma and chemotherapy, had piled up faster than Ruth could pay. The health insurance from Jenny's father had run dry months ago, and the hospital at the corner had sent a new invoice this morning for $320. The price of Jenny's next round of treatment. Inside the crate, Jenny's drawings caught the light in soft swirls of color. A country lane bordered by magnolia trees, their petals smudged by drops of rain in cobalt and rose. A woman's face, her voice husky nurse, captured in charcoal, lips pursed as if about to speak. An imaginary castle floating on clouds, turrets wreathed in lavender smoke. Each picture was an echo of her secret wish to escape illness, to become an artist whose hands could shape hope. In this moment, the world around her felt hollow. Cars with polished chrome, children's laughter drifting from a playground 2 blocks away, the steady hum of traffic on Riverside Drive. No one paused. A cloud of exhaust announced the arrival of an old green Chevy. Jenny looked up, smoothing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The man behind the wheel was stooped, his skin the color of worn leather from years under the sun. He rolled down the window without speaking, eyes scanning the drawings. He fished out a silver coin, placed it on the crate's lid, and tipped his head. Jenny's heart leapt. A sale. She stood to show him her best piece. But as the Chevrolet eased forward, the man discarded the drawing through the open window. Jenny saw it arc, paper flapping like wounded bird's wing, and land in a gutter of stale water. He drove off without a backward glance. The coin lay heavy on the crate, but Jenny did not pick it up. Instead, she reached for a damp rag, wiped her pencils clean, and set the next sheet of paper before her. She could feel her cheeks flush, not from heat, but from anger, humiliation. Yet tears did not come. She traced the edge of her stained dress with a fingertip, recalling her mother's gentle voice from last night. "Don't let them see you cry, sugar." That memory snapped her back. She was not frightened of a tossed drawing. Her little hands still held the power to bring something new into the world. The world simply refused to look. People continued their routines. A soldier in polished boots strode past, shoulders broad with duty, swallowed by the afternoon haze. A pair of churchgoers, their hymnals tucked under their arms, hurried by as if the gospel had no place here. A group of teenage girls in crisp dresses whispered to each other, casting curious glances but never stopping. For everyone, life went on. Groceries to fetch, bills to pay, lunch breaks measured in minutes. Jenny set her jaw and drew a deep breath, the heavy sweetness of heat and dust filling her lungs. She grasped a pencil, its ferrule bent, its tip dull from overuse, and let it dance across the page. She sketched the corner pharmacy, its white awning faded to something closer to gray, framing it against a sky tinged with promise. With each stroke, she imagined the money pooling into a silver bowl, sliding across hospital counters, paying for another treatment, another day. A breeze stirred and lifted the corner of her drawing as if eager to tell the world her story. But the street remained indifferent. Jenny pressed her lips together and frowned, her small forehead creasing with resolve. She would not leave until she had enough. She would not give up, even if every picture were thrown away. Because each time her pencil tutted softly against paper, she reclaimed a bit more of her life. The sun began its slow descent, casting longer shadows that stretched like dark fingers across the road. Jenny stacked the sketches she had sold, 2 that day, into a neat pile. 50 cents and a quarter, a dime and a nickel. Less than the price of a loaf of bread. But as she counted, her pulse steadied. Tomorrow, she thought, she would return with fresh drawings, and somehow, the city of Memphis would notice her. The next morning, the air carried a different weight. Thicker somehow, as if the sun had gotten closer overnight. Heat shimmered off the sidewalk in slow, pulsing waves, and the red bricks of the corner buildings radiated warmth like quiet furnaces. Jenny Campbell stood in her bedroom, carefully slipping folded drawings into the same old crate. These were the ones she'd saved for last, her best ones. She hesitated a second before placing them on top. A portrait of her mother, soft-eyed and strong-jawed, a moonlit cotton field dotted with invisible stories, a lion curled around a small girl, its mane shielding her like a curtain of fire. She walked past the screen door that creaked with complaint, her shoes scraping on the gravel path. The folding chair was under her arm again. By the time she reached the storefront, her fingers were sticky with sweat, but her grip didn't loosen. This time, she set up her tiny gallery 2 steps closer to the front entrance, closer to the traffic of footsteps and carts. She adjusted the sign, now rimmed with faded blue marker. My drawings, 50 cents. Above her, a humming wire buzzed with static electricity. She looked up for a moment and smiled. It was the same wire that had sparked the idea in her a week ago, when she'd first imagined herself out here, selling her art like the grown-ups sold watermelons or shining shoes. People moved differently today. Faster. Not rushed, but guarded. Jenny couldn't put her finger on it. Maybe it was just that she'd finally noticed the way the world kept its eyes forward, even when something begged to be seen. Around midday, a sharp laugh pierced the haze. A group of teenage boys, 3 of them, rounded the corner, their silhouettes jagged against the sunlight. One wore a white tank top, his arms thick and sunburned. Another had sunglasses pushed up on his forehead. The third, taller, was already smirking before they even reached her. "Hey, what's this?" the tall one said, picking up a drawing of a sunflower field. His thumb smudged the pastel yellows as he examined it like a museum critic. "You draw this?" Jenny nodded, cautiously. He held it up to the others. "Y'all, come look. Picasso here's got herself a sidewalk exhibit." His friends snorted. One grabbed 2 more sketches from the crate and flapped them like fans. The drawings hit the pavement one by one, fluttering down like leaves. "That ain't art," one of them said, his voice bored. "It's just scribbles." Jenny knelt to retrieve them, smoothing their creased corners with the heel of her palm. She said nothing, didn't look at them. Her eyes stayed on the paper, her hands steady even as her throat tightened. A second later, their laughter receded. They were gone, their footsteps swallowed by the hum of the avenue. She gathered the drawings gently, stacking them again, quieter this time. There was no tremor in her hands, but the light had changed. Her shadow now fell across the sign. She adjusted it anyway. 15 minutes passed before anyone else slowed down. A woman with a stroller paused to wipe sweat from her brow, glancing at the sign, but not the child behind it. A mailman in a short-sleeved uniform walked by, whistling something out of tune. He didn't notice her at all. Then the hum of a car approached. Low, quiet, deliberate. A black Lincoln Continental pulled to the curb just across the street. Its windows were tinted, making it impossible to see inside. It didn't park. It idled, the engine quiet, but present, as if listening. Jenny felt its presence before she turned her head. She tried not to stare. The driver's silhouette was barely visible, just the shape of a man sitting perfectly still. The car didn't move forward, didn't pull away, just watched, or seemed to. Her shoulders stiffened. The street no longer felt anonymous. It felt observed. She reached for a fresh sheet of paper, trying to pretend nothing was unusual. Her pencil touched the page, but the lines came slower this time. There was a heaviness to the graphite. She was halfway through outlining the bell tower of a church when the engine let out a low grumble, and the car pulled off, turning the corner without ever stopping. She exhaled, a breath she hadn't noticed she was holding. The day dragged on. People came and went. A student with a satchel covered in protest buttons walked by while reading a leaflet. 2 Marines in pressed uniforms crossed the street, arms swinging in rhythm, their eyes never straying from the path ahead. A pastor in a linen suit passed by with his Bible pressed tight to his chest. For a second, he slowed, his eyes flicking from her face to the drawings. Jenny straightened her back, but he nodded politely and kept moving. That evening, Ruth came home later than usual. Her apron smelled of bleach and sweat, and her fingers trembled as she pulled off her shoes. She found Jenny washing her hands at the kitchen sink, graphite caked under her fingernails. "You were out there again?" Ruth asked sharply, her voice taut. Jenny didn't answer right away. "Jenny, baby, this ain't right," Ruth said, moving toward her, her voice cracking. "You sitting out there with your little drawings, begging strangers like that. I can't bear it." "I'm not begging," Jenny said quietly, drying her hands with the corner of her dress. "I'm selling. I'm working." Ruth rubbed her forehead, sinking into a chair as if gravity had grown stronger. "It's not safe, sugar. People out there, they're not kind. You saw that today, didn't you?" Jenny turned, and for a second she looked so much older than her years it made Ruth flinch. "I know it's not safe," Jenny said, "but neither is waiting." Her voice didn't shake. She stepped closer, placed her small palm over her mother's larger hand, and said with terrifying calm, "It's my body, Mama. I gotta try. You already work all day. Let me work too." Ruth didn't speak. She only pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her tightly as if something fragile might fall loose inside her if she let go. Outside, the crickets had begun their soft chant. The last blush of day faded from the windows, and shadows crept across the floorboards. In the quiet that followed, the city of Memphis breathed on, indifferent, relentless. And somewhere inside it, a girl's determination hardened, like iron left too long in flame. Tomorrow would come, and Jenny would be waiting. Saturday morning came with a hush over South Memphis. The streets were washed in a faint silver mist, rising from the cracks in the pavement like breath from a sleeping animal. Birds called low from rusted lamp-posts. The corner drugstore hadn't even unlocked its front gate yet, but Jenny Campbell was already there, folding chair in hand, balancing her crate of drawings as if it carried gold. This time, she didn't go to the market entrance by the butcher's. Instead, she chose the corner beside the old pharmacy, Catlin's Drugs, where the foot traffic was heavier, closer to the bus stop and the late morning rush. The sidewalk here had more shade, and the dust didn't blow up as hard. Her fingers were smudged with charcoal from reworking a sketch she'd started at dawn. A back porch scene, her mama's coffee cup half full, a breeze lifting the hem of a cotton curtain. She nestled it at the top of her stack and set her sign on her lap. The cardboard had curled at the edges, but the words were clear. My drawings, 50 cents. Someone had traced a finger over them during the week. Someone with a ring, maybe. Jenny could still see the indent. By now, she had $17.20 tucked in a cloth envelope pinned to the bottom of her crate. She counted it each night before bed. It wasn't enough for the next chemo treatment, not even close, but it felt real, like bricks toward a wall she might someday finish. The sun inched upward. Church bells rang faintly from a few blocks east. A man with a fedora passed, tipped his hat, but didn't stop. A dog barked twice. The world went on. And then it happened. The air changed. Not with a gust or a crack, but with something lower. A sound. A hum. The kind of deep engine rumble that didn't belong to delivery trucks or city cars. Jenny turned her head before she even knew why. Down the street, at the edge of the avenue, a long white Cadillac Fleetwood rolled into view like a ghost in chrome. Its paint caught the morning sun, gleaming against the grime of its surroundings. It didn't speed. It glided. As it approached, people turned. Not dramatically, just instinctively, like cattle noticing a shift in the weather. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A newspaper dropped. A boy on a bicycle nearly hit a post. The Cadillac pulled to the curb, 2 car lengths down from where Jenny sat. It didn't move for a moment. The street seemed to hold its breath. Then the driver's door creaked open, and out stepped a figure in black. Not a suit, not formal, just sharp, effortless. He wore dark sunglasses, even though the sun was still finding its strength. His shirt was open at the collar, and his boots tapped gently against the concrete with each step. There was no security, no entourage, just him, alone. Jenny's breath caught somewhere between her ribs. She had seen pictures, magazine covers, bus station posters. Once, a neighbor's TV had shown a live concert, though Jenny only glimpsed seconds of it through the screen door. But seeing him now, real, walking, felt like watching someone step out of a different world and into this cracked sidewalk. Elvis Presley walked past her without stopping. His boots made a soft rhythm, like a slow drumbeat. He entered Catlin's Drugs. The bell above the door jingled lightly. Jenny sat frozen, pencil in hand, heart in her throat. She didn't dare look around, but she could feel it. The street leaning in, heads turning, whispers starting like leaves rustling before a storm. He was gone for maybe 2 minutes. Then the bell rang again. He stepped back out, hands empty. Jenny looked down at her drawings. She wanted to hide them now, suddenly shy of their uneven lines and blotched shadows. But he didn't leave. He paused. And then, slowly, he turned, walked back, toward her. She stood up without thinking. Her legs shook slightly, but she kept them straight. She smoothed the front of her dress, tried not to show the smudge on her forearm, and raised her eyes to meet his. He stopped in front of her, not towering, not looming, just standing there, real, solid, human. He pointed to the topmost drawing. His voice was quiet but clear. "Whose work is this?" Jenny swallowed. "Mine." There was no tremble in her voice, only breathlessness. He crouched slightly to get a closer look, picked up a sheet, the lion and the girl beneath its mane. He held it delicately, like something sacred. Not a single crease added to the page. "You did this?" he asked again. She nodded. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened behind the sunglasses. A strange kind of stillness fell over him, like a man listening to music only he could hear. Then, without warning, he stood, reached into his back pocket, pulled out a thick leather wallet. Jenny's hands instinctively tightened on the crate. He didn't count, didn't ask, just peeled off a stack of crisp bills, folded neatly, and placed them in the tin box taped beside the sign. "For treatment." $500, he said. Jenny blinked. "Sir? That's two." He held up a hand. "It ain't charity," he said. "It's a purchase. I'll be taking all of them." He gathered every last drawing, gently, like someone cradling sleeping birds, and tucked them into a long envelope he pulled from his coat. Not a sound from the crowd. People had gathered, quietly, reverently, like churchgoers watching something sacred unfold. No one dared interrupt. Jenny stood, stunned, her hands empty. And then the flood came. A woman stepped forward. A schoolteacher, Jenny thought. "Sweetheart, may I see what you have left?" A man with a cigarette asked her name. A teenage girl dropped a quarter in the box, even though there was nothing left to buy. The crowd grew, not chaotic, but warm, like the kind of attention Jenny had never known. For the first time all week, she saw eyes that weren't passing over her, but seeing her. And then, Jenny! Her mother. Ruth came running from the laundromat across the street, apron still damp, hair pinned in haste. She looked not angry, but afraid, overwhelmed. She pushed through the small gathering, reached her daughter, pulled her close. I thought. She stopped herself, looked at Elvis. He removed his sunglasses then, looked directly at her. "Ma'am," he said, with a slight nod, his voice lower, humbler. "If it's all right, I'd like a word." Ruth hesitated, her hand still on Jenny's back. Then she nodded. Elvis turned and gestured toward the curb, where the Cadillac waited in patient silence. Ruth followed, one last glance at her daughter over her shoulder. Jenny watched them walk away, watched as the man in black leaned against his car, talking softly to her mother, not grand, not performative, just earnest. She sat back down, stunned. Her crate was empty, but her soul felt full. People still hovered, offering smiles, soft questions, but she barely noticed. Somewhere deep inside her, the dust of the week began to settle, not into stillness, but into shape. Something new was being built. And Jenny Campbell, 9 years old, sat quietly at the edge of that transformation. They didn't talk about what was said by the Cadillac that day. Not right away. Not even that night. Ruth came back from the curb looking pale, but not frightened. There was a strange focus in her expression, like someone walking a tightrope and refusing to glance down. Jenny helped her fold laundry until almost midnight. The radio hummed softly in the background, Mahalia Jackson, maybe. And the usual silences between them weren't heavy this time. They were intentional, like breathing. The next morning, Ruth took the envelope of money and quietly paid the clinic. She didn't cry when she handed it to the woman behind the desk. Jenny sat in the waiting chair, flipping through an old issue of Collier's, pretending not to notice how the nurse's eyes widened when she saw the name Presley written on the donation slip. The treatments resumed, stronger this time, sharper. Jenny's stomach churned for days, but she held her own. A damp cloth over her eyes, fingers curled around her sketch pencil like a lifeline. The doctors were cautious with their words. "No promises," one of them said, "but we've got a fighting chance now." It was enough. A week passed, then two, and then another envelope arrived. No return address. Just her name, handwritten in black ink. Inside, a note. "Jenny, you have a gift. Don't let this town talk you out of it. Enclosed is something to help you get started. I asked a friend in Nashville about art schools. She'll call. Keep drawing. E. Dot." Underneath the note was a bank draft. $5,000. Ruth sat at the kitchen table for an hour holding the envelope, not saying a word. Eventually, she slid it across to Jenny and said only, "You'd better start practicing your signatures. People are going to want autographs one day." Jenny laughed for the first time in weeks. Spring came slow to Memphis that year. The rains dragged out through April, and the river seemed swollen with stories. On afternoons when she could, Jenny sat by the window and sketched. Not just animals anymore, or little fairy girls with bare feet, but the faces of people in waiting rooms, the curl of a hand holding a paper cup, the way her mother looked when she thought no one was watching. And every Saturday, no matter how tired she felt, she returned to the same corner by Catlin's Drugs, this time with a folding easel her mother found second-hand. She didn't need the crate anymore. Her drawings were clipped to a clothesline stretched between two broomsticks. A sign above them read, simply, "Jenny Campbell, $2 a sketch, or pay what you can." People still remembered. Not just the Elvis moment, but her. The girl who didn't flinch, who stood up and kept drawing even when her hair started to fall and her arms went thin as wire. By early May, she had orders coming in from 4 different counties. A teacher asked her to sketch portraits of the entire 6th grade. A preacher commissioned a charcoal mural of the Good Samaritan for his church vestibule. An old man in overalls bought a picture of his wife sitting on their porch. Said it was the only way he could still see her clearly. She was still tired most days, still dizzy sometimes after the medicine. But her hand never stopped moving. Then, on a Tuesday morning, her mother came into her room holding the phone against her chest. "It's for you," she said, eyebrows raised. "From Nashville." Jenny sat up, brushing crumbs from the covers. The voice on the other end was warm, clear, and completely unfamiliar. A woman. Polished, but not distant. "Miss Campbell, this is Maureen Wells. I represent the Conservatory of Southern Arts. Mr. Presley spoke to us about you. We'd like to offer you a partial scholarship for the summer intensive if you're well enough to travel. There's room and board and a studio. You'd have to bring your own brushes, but everything else is covered." Jenny didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was almost a whisper. "Yes, ma'am. I'd like that very much." The morning she left for Nashville, half the block came to see her off. Kids waved paper flags. Old ladies brought sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Even the man who sold cigarettes at the gas station wiped a tear and said, "Y'all take care now." The bus smelled like diesel and oranges. Ruth sat beside her with a battered suitcase between them and a Bible on her lap. Jenny stared out the window as Memphis rolled away. Laundromats, pawn shops, the corner where it all started. She wasn't nervous, just ready. Nashville wasn't what she expected. Bigger, louder. The dormitory echoed with voices and footfalls at all hours, and some of the other students had been drawing since they could hold a spoon. But none of them had a folder full of commissions from the Mississippi Delta, or a drawing that had hung behind the pulpit of a Baptist church, or a letter signed simply E. She kept to herself, drew constantly. When the instructors asked for landscapes, she drew her neighborhood. When they asked for still lifes, she gave them half-eaten biscuits on chipped porcelain. Her pieces didn't always win praise, but they always stopped people mid-step. One afternoon, as she worked on a large canvas, her mother's hands shelling peas seen from above, a tall man entered the studio. He wore no tie, no badge, but she knew immediately. He waited until she noticed him. Then he tipped his head. "Elvis," she whispered. He walked over, quiet as a memory, looked down at the canvas, smiled. Not his show smile, but something quieter. "She always workin'?" he asked. Jenny nodded. "Always." He stepped back, hands in his pockets. "I wanted to see how you were doin'. Maureen said you weren't scaring off the teachers yet." She grinned. "Not yet." He looked around the studio. "This place, it's different than home, ain't it?" "Yeah," she said, "but it's good different." They stood in silence for a moment. Then he turned to leave. Before he reached the door, he stopped. Without turning back, he said, "You know, most people think lucky breaks fall from the sky. But they don't. They land where they see somebody already digging." Jenny didn't answer. She didn't need to. Years later, long after the last chemo, after her mother's hair turned white, after the scholarship turned into a full ride, and then a gallery, and then a name whispered around Southern art circles, Jenny sat in her studio overlooking a stretch of river and painted the sky the way it had looked that morning on the sidewalk when the world shifted. A knock came at the door. It was a young girl, local, hair in tight braids, holding a sketchbook against her chest like armor. "I heard you help kids who want to draw," she said. Jenny smiled. "Come in. Let's see what you've got." And on a shelf nearby, faded slightly with time, was a drawing of a lion and a girl beneath its mane, both of them watching the storm pass.